Here's a game that seems easy and gets uncomfortable fast. Name something humans can do that no other animal can. Go ahead. Take your time. Most people start confidently. Tool use, obviously. Except crows use tools, and otters use rocks, and chimpanzees strip twigs to fish termites from mounds. Language, then. Except dolphins have signature whistles that function as names. Whales sing songs that evolve culturally, and various primates have been taught to use hundreds of symbols with meaningful combinations. Emotion, elephants grieve, cooperation, wolves coordinate hunts, self-awareness. Great apes and dolphins pass the mirror test. Planning for the future? Scrub jays hide food and appear to think about it strategically. Mathematics? Chimpanzees outperform humans on certain short-term memory numerical tasks. By this point in the game, most people have landed in one of two uncomfortable positions. Either they're arguing that the differences are a matter of degree rather than kind, humans just do these things better, or they're reaching for something increasingly specific and starting to sound defensive about it. The degree argument is actually closer to the truth than most people realize, and it deserves respect rather than dismissal. But here's what that argument misses. There are things that humans do that no other animal does at all. Not in a diminished form, not approximately, not with assistance, not under artificial conditions, completely absent in every other species, or so functionally different from what other animals do that the same label cannot meaningfully apply to both. These are not the abilities that make good headlines because they're not the dramatic, cinematic ones. They are stranger than that, more foundational and more revealing about what human intelligence actually is and where it actually came from than any list of impressive cognitive parlor tricks. Here is what humans can do that no other animal on Earth can, and here is why each one matters more than it initially appears. Start with the one that is simultaneously the most obvious and the most underappreciated: cumulative culture. Every other animal that has culture in any meaningful sense, chimps with specific tool traditions, dolphins with sponge tool foraging techniques, birds with regional song variations, has what researchers call flat culture. The traditions exist. They are transmitted between individuals and across generations, but they do not accumulate. The sponge-using dolphins of Shark Bay in Australia have been using sponges on their rostrums to protect themselves when foraging over sandy seafloor for several decades of documented observation. The technique is the same now as it was when first documented. It has not been improved. Nobody looked at the existing sponge technique and thought about how to make it more effective, added a modification, and transmitted the modified version. The tradition is static. Human culture accumulates. This sounds simple and is actually one of the most extraordinary features of the human cognitive system. Each generation does not start from scratch. It starts from where the previous generation left off and adds to it. The result is a ratchet effect. Knowledge and technique build on themselves, each generation passing on a more sophisticated version than they received, with no individual having to independently invent all the steps that led to the current state. No other animal does this. The ratchet clicks and holds in humans. In every other species with cultural transmission, the ratchet slips back. Techniques are transmitted but not substantially improved through the transmission process. The mechanisms behind this difference are debated. Faithful imitation, language-enabled instruction, theory of mind allowing understanding of the demonstrator's intentions. But the outcome is clear and consistent. Human culture accumulates and no other animals does. The practical consequence of this difference is everything around you right now. Every piece of technology, every item of clothing, every built structure, every piece of infrastructure, none of it could have been invented by any single human or even any single generation of humans. It required thousands of years of accumulated improvements, each generation receiving the current state of knowledge and adding to it. The phone you may be holding while watching this is the product of uncountable layers of accumulated human knowledge, each layer building on the previous ones, going back to the first stone tools. No individual human could independently invent a smartphone. Every human in history has been, at best, one ratchet click in an enormously long chain. This is what makes the degree argument insufficient when comparing human culture to animal culture. It is not that humans have more culture or better culture. The architecture is fundamentally different. One accumulates and one does not. And the gap that opens between an accumulating system and a non-accumulating system over thousands of years is not a matter of degree. It is the difference between stone tools and semiconductor fabrication. The second uniquely human capacity is recursive syntax. And this is where the language comparison with other animals falls apart in a way that the simple claim animals have language too fails to capture. The communication systems of other animals, even sophisticated ones, are what linguists call finite state systems. They can produce a fixed range of combinations from a fixed set of signals, with each combination constructed by moving through a finite sequence of states. Even the most impressive animal communication systems, the symbolic lexicograms of language-trained chimpanzees, the complex calls of vervet monkeys, the song structures of various bird species, operate within this architectural constraint. Human language has a different architecture. It is recursive. It can embed structures within structures within structures indefinitely, creating an infinite number of possible sentences from a finite number of elements. The cat sat on the mat, and the cat that the dog that the woman who the man saw owns chased sat on the mat are both grammatically possible English sentences. The second one is nearly incomprehensible at first read, but it is grammatically well-formed, and the reason it is well-formed is because the recursive structure of English allows embedding of one clause inside another indefinitely. No finite state system can do this. Why does this matter? Because recursive syntax is what allows humans to express and communicate an unlimited number of new thoughts, not a large number, not a practically sufficient number. Unlimited. Every new situation, every new idea, every new conceptual combination that has never existed before can be expressed precisely in a recursive language to someone who has never encountered it, in a form that they can understand, evaluate, and transmit to others. No other communication system has this property. The difference is not that humans have a more elaborate version of what dolphins have. The difference is that human language can say things that have never been said before in ways that the listener can fully understand. While dolphin communication, sophisticated as it is, operates within a fixed combinatorial space. This architectural difference is the reason human language can transmit technical instructions across generations while animal communication cannot, and it is therefore part of the foundation on which cumulative culture rests. Third, hypothetical thinking, specifically the ability to reason about counterfactual and hypothetical scenarios with the same cognitive tools used to reason about real ones. Humans can think about things that are not happening, have not happened, could not happen, and will never happen. They can manipulate hypothetical scenarios, run mental simulations of possible futures, consider alternatives to past events, and reason about logical possibilities that have no physical instantiation. This capacity is so normal for humans that it requires deliberate effort to recognize how unusual it is. Animals show some capacity for mental representation of things not currently present. Food caches that are remembered in the absence of the food, anticipated predator behavior that drives early defensive responses. But the flexible, open-ended manipulation of arbitrary hypothetical scenarios is a different capability. Humans can reason about scenarios they have never experienced, in domains they have never encountered, involving objects and events with no physical reality. Abstract mathematics, fiction, moral philosophy, long-term strategic planning, scientific modeling, all of these depend on the ability to work with representations of things that do not currently exist and may never exist. The behavioral evidence for this in other animals is thin despite decades of searching. What researchers find repeatedly is that animal cognition is strongly anchored to concrete, ecologically relevant scenarios that the animal has evolutionary and experiential preparation for. Detach the problem from that ecological anchoring. Ask a chimpanzee to reason about a purely abstract logical relationship rather than about food or social status. And performance drops dramatically. Human cognition uniquely appears to detach from ecological anchoring and operate on arbitrary abstract content with equivalent facility. This matters because most of the things that make human civilization work are arbitrary abstractions. Money, law, nations, religions, scientific theories, mathematical proofs. None of these exist in the physical world in the way a rock or a food item exists. They are intersubjective fictions that humans maintain through collective belief and that can be reasoned about, modified, and coordinated over because human cognition can operate on arbitrary hypothetical content. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. Fourth, and related to the hypothetical thinking point, the capacity for open-ended goal creation rather than fixed goal pursuit. Every non-human animal pursues goals that were either genetically encoded or formed through individual learning within ecological constraints. A lion pursues prey. A bird builds a nest. A chimpanzee seeks food, social status, and mating opportunities. These goals are real, and the strategies for pursuing them can be flexible and sophisticated. But the goals themselves are closed. They are the goals the animal's biology and experience have established within the ecological problems that species faces. Humans create new goals that were not in any prior program and have no ecological precedent. The goal of understanding the composition of atomic nuclei. The goal of producing a specific type of music. The goal of climbing a particular mountain. The goal of representing a political philosophy through fiction. The goal of determining whether faster-than-light travel is theoretically possible. None of these goals are genetically encoded. None of them were formed through individual ecological learning. They are the products of imagination applied to cultural content, producing novel objectives that no prior version of the goal setter or their ancestors ever pursued. This open-ended goal creation is part of what makes human behavior so difficult to model and predict compared to animal behavior. An animal's behavioral space, while potentially complex, is bounded by the ecological niche and the goal set that history has provided. A human's behavioral space is, in principle, unbounded. New goals can be created faster than they can be pursued, in domains that have no ecological existence. Fifth, teaching with explanation. This one is subtle but important. Other animals teach. Adult meerkats bring injured prey to juveniles to practice killing, a behavior that appears oriented toward skill development in the young. Wild chimpanzee mothers have been observed positioning themselves and their tool use to give juveniles better viewing angles. These are real, meaningful forms of pedagogy. But they are not teaching with explanation. No non-human animal has been documented explaining to another animal why a technique works, what the underlying principle is, or how to generalize the technique to novel situations. Animal teaching, where it occurs, is demonstrational. Show the behavior, allow observation and practice. Let the learner extract whatever information they can from watching. Human teaching is explicatory. Humans routinely communicate not just what to do, but why. The causal principles underlying a technique, the conditions under which it applies, the reasons it works better than alternatives. This explicatory teaching is enormously more efficient at transmitting knowledge than demonstrational teaching because it allows the learner to generalize from the principle rather than from the specific demonstration. A learner who understands why a tool works can apply that understanding to new tools in new situations. A learner who only observed the tool being used has to relearn for each new situation. Explicatory teaching is part of why cumulative culture accelerates the way it does. When humans transmit knowledge, they transmit not just the current technique, but the conceptual framework that allows the technique to be improved. Each generation receives not just a procedure, but an understanding, and understanding is what allows improvement rather than mere replication. Sixth, large-scale cooperation between genetic strangers based on shared abstract beliefs. Other animals cooperate. Wolves hunt in packs. Chimpanzees form coalitions. Ants operate in colonies of millions with sophisticated division of labor. But in every case, the cooperation is bounded by genetic relatedness, by direct reciprocity between individuals who know each other, or by pheromone-based chemical communication that only works within the immediate group. Humans cooperate at scales and across social distances that no other animal approaches. A construction crew building a skyscraper involves hundreds of people who have never met, coordinating through contracts, currency, blueprints, regulations, and shared beliefs about professional obligation, all of which are abstract systems that exist only because humans collectively believe in them. An international scientific collaboration involves thousands of researchers from dozens of countries who have never met, sharing data and techniques across languages and institutions, cooperating toward abstract goals whose value every participant accepts on the basis of cultural transmission rather than direct experience. The mechanism that enables this is the human capacity for shared belief in intersubjective abstractions. Entities that exist because humans believe in them collectively, and that can coordinate behavior across enormous numbers of people who have no direct relationship. Money is the most obvious example. Its value exists entirely in collective belief. A banknote has no intrinsic value as an object. Its function as a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account depends on millions of people holding coordinated beliefs about its significance. No other animal has developed anything functionally equivalent. This capacity scales. Nations coordinate the behavior of hundreds of millions of people through shared belief in national identity, legal systems, and political institutions. Religions coordinate the behavior of billions through shared belief in theological propositions and moral frameworks. These systems, for all their historical complexity and frequent dysfunction, are mechanisms for human coordination at scales that have no parallel anywhere else in the animal kingdom. Seventh, deliberate abstract art production. Art created for its own sake, expressing ideas with no functional survival value, using symbolic and aesthetic conventions that require cultural knowledge to interpret. Other animals produce things that humans sometimes find beautiful. Bowerbirds arrange objects in patterns that influence mate choice. Some bird songs have aesthetic qualities that appear to influence the listener's emotional state. But these are functional behaviors that evolved for specific reproductive or communicative purposes. No other animal creates representations of things that are not present, uses symbolic conventions to communicate abstract ideas, or produces objects whose primary value is aesthetic or conceptual rather than functional. The cave paintings of Lascaux and Altamira were produced 45,000 and 35,000 years ago, respectively, by humans who were in the middle of ice ages under significant survival pressure, with limited free time and limited material resources. They chose to use some of those resources to create detailed, technically sophisticated, aesthetically considered images of animals on cave walls in locations that required torchlight to see. The paintings were not functional in any survival sense. They were symbolic representations created for purposes that we can only partially reconstruct. Perhaps ritual, perhaps communicative, perhaps aesthetic in the simple sense of humans making beautiful things because beauty matters to them. No other animal does this. The category of behavior that produces art, deliberate aesthetic creation for its own sake, using symbolic conventions, in the absence of any direct survival function, appears to be uniquely human in the full sense. Eighth, the systematic accumulation and transmission of knowledge about the future through time, history, in the specific sense of documented record-keeping intended for people who do not yet exist. Humans write things down for people they will never meet, who will not be born until after they are dead, describing events and ideas. They want those future people to know about. This is a strange thing to do if you think about it from a pure evolutionary cost-benefit perspective. Investing resources in creating and preserving information for individuals you cannot benefit from and may never know. Yet humans have done this systematically for at least 5,000 years, and probably longer using non-written symbolic systems. The consequence is that humans alive today have access to the thoughts, observations, and experiences of people who have been dead for thousands of years, from civilizations in distant parts of the world, across cultural and linguistic barriers so substantial that accessing the information requires years of specialized training. This accumulated transmission of knowledge across time is another foundation of cumulative culture. It means that the ratchet clicks are preserved not just in living memory and demonstrated practice, but in physical records that persist when the people who created them are gone. No other animal accumulates records intended for future individuals. No animal creates durable information repositories designed to outlast themselves and communicate to descendants. The library, in the most expansive sense of any system for preserving and transmitting knowledge across time, is uniquely human, and it is one of the most powerful cognitive tools ever developed because it decouples knowledge transmission from individual lifespan. What all of these uniquely human capabilities share is something worth identifying clearly. They are all social cognitive capacities that operate through collective systems rather than individual brains. Cumulative culture, recursive language, large-scale cooperation, explicatory teaching, history making, all of these are distributed capabilities that exist in the space between individual humans, not in any individual human brain. No individual human is smarter than a chimpanzee in a simple, raw, computational sense. The cognitive differences between individual human and chimpanzee brains, while real, are not so dramatic as to explain the enormous difference in outcomes. What explains the difference is that human cognitive capabilities combine with each other and with social systems to produce emergent collective intelligence that no individual brain possesses. The human species is, in the most meaningful sense, a collective intelligence, a distributed cognitive system that uses language, culture, institutions, and accumulated records to think thoughts and solve problems that no individual member could approach. Each human born into the system receives an enormous cognitive inheritance from the collective. Language, concepts, cultural frameworks, scientific understanding, technological knowledge that makes their individual cognition vastly more powerful than it would be in isolation. Remove a human from the collective, and you have an animal that is, in most environments, not particularly competitive. Give that human full access to the collective inheritance, language, education, cultural knowledge, technology, and you have something with capabilities that no other animal approaches. What humans can do that no other animal can is not primarily a function of what individual human brains do differently. It is a function of what human social cognitive systems collectively do. And collectively, they do something that has no precedent in the evolutionary history of life on Earth. The game at the beginning of this video is now easier. Name something humans can do that no other animal can. Name any piece of accumulated cumulative culture, any act of explicatory teaching, any large-scale cooperation between genetic strangers, any use of recursive syntax to express a thought that has never been expressed before, any historical record created for people not yet born. That is the answer. It was always the answer. It just required understanding what the right question actually was.